Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me for another Tales from the Crypt review. Today it is Season 1, Episode 5, Lover Come Hack to Me, directed by Tom Holland and starring Amanda Plummer as Peggy. And once again, there will be episode spoilers in this review. This episode, Lover Come Hack to Me, is below average in my opinion. It's not terrible. I actually think the concept and some of the ideas behind the episode are pretty good. But in my opinion, the episode takes a little bit too long to get going, and even when it does get into the main plot, it's kind of uneven. But there are a couple pretty good moments in the episode that might make it worth watching. So we start with Peggy and Charles, and they've just gotten married. They're our main characters. And there's also another character named Aunt Edith who's there, and she doesn't seem too happy about the marriage. She actually warns Charles about it and says he'll be sorry for marrying Peggy. He doesn't seem too concerned as he tells her when he comes back he wants her out of the house. But when they leave, Aunt Edith doesn't seem too upset about this either. As a matter of fact, she smiles, leading us to believe that something much more is going on. So the couple, the newly married couple, decide to drive to their hotel, but they get detoured along the way, and we also find out that they're in possession of a gun, which neither one claims to know anything about. One thing this episode does do is it makes us suspicious of both lead characters, and it does that pretty well. So they eventually wind up going in this abandoned house because they really have no other choice, and they investigate the house for a while. It turns out the phone's not working. Of course, because nobody lives there and because of the bad weather. I guess it makes sense. And there's some interesting things in the house, like an axe on the wall, which will come into play later. Also, you can tell Charles is ready for some action, I guess is a good way to put it, but Peggy seems very reluctant about it and even a little bit upset. So we're still suspicious of both characters. So they talk. And Peggy's definitely unsure about the marriage, but Charles tries to reassure her. He says he really loves her. He didn't just marry her for her money, but we can tell that he's playing a game right now. And both characters are pretty strange. There is some good suspense and build-up, but there's not much plot progression, and we're already pretty far into the episode, making the episode kind of a slow build, which kind of works, but kind of doesn't as well at the same time. So then they go upstairs and find a bedroom. And the bed is awfully nice compared to the rest of the house, I have to say, leading to more suspicion. So eventually they do make love after Peggy comes out, being much more aggressive and looking very different. And Charles now seems to really genuinely be into her. But while they're making love, in a pretty long and strange scene, I guess it's appropriate for the episode, some weird things start going on in the rest of the house. We hear noises and things like that. And when they're done making love, Peggy also says she's pretty sure she's pregnant, which is also interesting and will come into play at the end of the episode. So basically we go to the next scene and Charles wakes up. Peggy's nowhere to be found, but Charles sees her with another guy outside. All of a sudden Peggy looks very aggressive and very different. Charles gets really upset about this, and Peggy starts making out with the other guy, and she says the same thing she told Charles, but then all of a sudden she snaps. She actually winds up killing this guy. Charles goes to try and grab her, but he actually goes right through her. And I have to say, this scene has some pretty poor effects, in my opinion. I think it was supposed to be shocking and creepy, but I actually laughed when Charles went directly through Peggy's body. It doesn't really look very good and doesn't really work at all. But in some ways it's great because it's one of those things that's funny and memorable. So at this point we learn that both Peggy and the other man are ghosts, and that this is supposed to represent Peggy's parents, and that her mother killed her father on their wedding night, and this was also the night that Peggy was conceived. So at least finally we're into the main plot of the episode, 2/3 of the way through the episode, so I guess that's good anyway. So eventually Charles wakes up. We find out he was dreaming the old "it was all a dream" thing, but it kind of works here, so I'll just leave it alone. I guess he was dreaming from the point that he saw Peggy's mother with the other man, if that makes sense. So eventually he tells Peggy what happened in the nightmare, and she says that's actually exactly what really did happen. So Charles tries to use the gun to kill Peggy. Of course, the gun doesn't work for whatever reason, and Peggy kills Charles with the axe that we saw earlier instead. And I have to say, this is a pretty bloody scene. But it was a slow build to the climax, so I thought it worked okay. But so then we get one final scene with Peggy and Aunt Edith, and we learn that Peggy really is pregnant and that the cycle will continue, and someday her daughter will be looking for a man, and I guess the same thing will continue to happen. So I did kind of like the twist at the end. It just takes a long time to get there. The main plot kind of comes out of nowhere. And it's just very uneven in my opinion. But there are a few memorable scenes, even if the episode takes a long time to get where it's going. So I'm going to give Lover Come Hack to Me a 2 out of 5. Hardcore fans of the show might want to check this one out, but others can probably pass. So a 2 out of 5 for Lover Come Hack to Me. And as always, thank you very much for watching.